In May 1979, a 66-year-old woman died of a heart attack in a hotel penthouse in Los Angeles. She had once been, quite possibly, the richest young woman on the planet. On her 21st birthday, she came into a fortune of roughly $50 million, more than $1 billion in today's money, built from the nickels and dimes of Woolworths, the store empire her grandfather founded. When she died, the figure reported from her estate became legend: $3,500 in the bank. She had been married 7 times. She had owned palaces on 3 continents, the pearls of Marie Antoinette, and one of the great diamonds of the world. The press had a name for her before she was old enough to understand it: the poor little rich girl. Her name was Barbara Hutton. And her story is what happens when a fortune is the only thing a child is ever given. Every other story we've told on this channel is about families, fortune split, feuded over, mismanaged across generations. This one is simpler and darker. One person, no business to run, no empire to defend, just money and 50 years of spending it on the one thing it cannot buy. Here's the machine of this story, up front. Barbara Hutton didn't lose her fortune to bad investments. Her father's investing actually grew it through the worst crash in history. She spent it on husbands with titles, on hangers-on, on palaces, on anyone who promised for a price to love her. The arithmetic of the spending is astonishing, but the reason underneath it was set before she was 5 years old. In a hotel room at the Plaza, Frank Winfield Woolworth built the most democratic fortune in America. His idea was almost insultingly simple: a store where everything cost 5 or 10 cents, where the poorest family in town could shop like anyone else. By the time he died, there were more than 1,000 Woolworth stores. In 1913, he built the tallest building on earth, the Woolworth Building in Manhattan, and paid its $13.5 million cost entirely in cash. A cathedral of commerce built out of nickels. He died in 1919 of an infected tooth he was too stubborn to have treated. A man worth $76 million, killed by the cost of a dentist's visit. That was the empire. The heiress came broken. Barbara's mother, Edna Woolworth Hutton, died at the Plaza Hotel in 1917 at 33. The official cause was a chronic ear disease. The rumor, never resolved, whispered for decades, and supported by her biographer, was suicide, in despair over her husband's affairs, and the detail that explains everything that followed. According to that biographer, the person who found the body was Edna's daughter, Barbara. She was 4 years old. The Woolworth machine did what machines do. It processed the tragedy financially. The child inherited roughly $25 million in trust. Her father, Franklin Hutton, brother of the stockbroker E.F. Hutton, managed it with genuine skill, even steering it safely through the crash of 1929. Money was the one form of care the family never failed to provide. Everything else, a home, attention, love, she would spend her life shopping for. In December 1930, as the Depression was beginning to starve the country, her family threw her a debutante ball at the Ritz-Carlton that cost $60,000, a lifetime of wages for one of the Woolworth shopgirls, whose labor underwrote it. The press did the arithmetic, and America made up its mind about Barbara Hutton before she turned 19. Hate mail, pickets, the poor little rich girl. She was the face of everything the ruined country resented, a face that had never asked for any of it. On her 21st birthday, in 1933, she took control of the fortune, roughly $50 million, in the pit of the Depression, and then began one of the strangest spending campaigns in financial history: the purchase, 7 times over, of love. Husband 1, Alexis Madavani, a Georgian prince from a family so famous for wedding heiresses, the press called them the marrying Madavanis. He collected more than $1 million in gifts and settlements. 2 years and gone. Husband 2, a Danish count, Kurt von Haugwitz Reventlow. He gave her a title, her only child, a son, Lance, and beatings. One of them put her in the hospital and him in a jail cell. The divorce and the custody war cost her millions more. It was during this marriage in 1937 that she renounced her American citizenship for tax reasons, legal and catastrophic. To a country already primed to hate her, the nickel and dime heiress had now taken the nickels and left. She spent the rest of her life trying to buy back the affection of a public that never forgave her. After the war, she handed her London mansion, Winfield House, to the United States government for a token sum. It is still the American ambassador's residence today. It didn't help. Pause on the citizenship scandal, because it explains the shape of her whole public life. Congress denounced her. Newspapers ran tallies of what the Hutton Trust saved in taxes, and on the picket lines outside Woolworth stores in the late 30s, striking shopgirls, women earning in a week what Barbara's ball had cost per guest, carried her name as a weapon against the company. She had become something almost no human being can survive being, a symbol, not a person who spent money badly, but the face of unearned wealth itself, printed fresh every morning. Friends said she read the coverage compulsively. The press called her poor little rich girl. The deeper truth is that the press and the public were the eighth marriage, the longest, cruelest transaction of her life, and the only one she never stopped paying into. Husband 3 was the exception that proves everything. Cary Grant. The most famous movie star on earth, the press, delighted, called the marriage cash and carry. He was also the only husband who signed away every claim and took nothing. The one man who didn't need her money was the one she couldn't keep. The marriage dissolved in 3 years, and they stayed friends for life. Sit with that. The only marriage that wasn't a transaction was the only one that left no wreckage. Then the pattern resumed, worse. A penniless Russian prince, then, in 1953, the Dominican playboy Porfirio Rubirosa, a man functionally employed as a husband of heiresses, who spent the honeymoon continuing his affair with Zsa Gabor, and walked away after 53 days with a settlement worth some $3.5 million. A converted bomber aircraft, polo ponies, and a new wardrobe. 53 days. Then a German tennis baron. Then finally, a Laotian painter whose princely title she reportedly bought outright for $50,000. By the end, she wasn't even marrying titles anymore. She was manufacturing them. Between the weddings, the money poured out in every direction. A palace in the old city of Tangier, where she held parties with snake charmers and watched from a throne. A full replica of a Japanese palace built in Cuernavaca, Mexico, with materials shipped across the Pacific. The Pasha diamond, 40 carats, which she had recut to sit better on her hand. Shaving away a fortune in stone. Marie Antoinette's pearls, bought by her father for her first wedding. The jewels of a queen who lost her head, given to a bride who would lose everything else. And around all of it, the court. Secretaries, princes, healers, decorators, companions, an entourage that biographers describe less as a staff than as a feeding system. She tipped in thousands. She gave jewels to strangers at parties. Some of it was stolen outright. Most of it was simply asked for, because everyone had learned the one true thing about Barbara Hutton. She could not say no to anyone who was kind to her, because kindness was the thing she was buying. Do the arithmetic on the pace of it. $50 million, even sitting still in the conservative bonds of that era, threw off enough income that spending it down should have been nearly impossible. That's what makes this story mathematically remarkable. Palaces are one-time purchases. Even Rubirosa was a one-time purchase. What killed the principle was the permanent overhead. Households on 3 continents fully staffed year-round for a woman who was always somewhere else. Retainers on lifetime salaries, settlements that didn't end with the marriages, and a court of dozens who had structured their entire lives around her generosity. A fortune can survive extravagant days. It cannot survive an extravagant standing army. By the 60s, she was no longer spending her income. She was selling the stones out of her own legend to meet payroll. She ate almost nothing, an anorexia that began with a teenage diet and never released her. The fortune's last decades ran on barbiturates, alcohol, injections, and sold jewelry. And then, in 1972, the one genuine thing she had, her son Lance, a race car driver, the single person she loved without a transaction, died in a plane crash in Colorado at 36. Those who knew her said she ended there, 7 years before her heart agreed. Now the honest question, because it's easy to file this under spoiled heiress, and it would miss the entire point. Barbara Hutton was not stupid. She spoke several languages, wrote poetry, and by every account was generous to a fault in an era when her class mostly wasn't. The fortune didn't die of stupidity. It died because it was assigned a job money cannot do. Every purchase in this story, the princes, the titles, the thrones, the tips, is the same purchase, proof, for a girl who found her mother's body at 4 and was raised by bank statements, that she was worth loving. The fortune wasn't wasted on luxury. It was spent, dollar by dollar, on a question. And everyone she paid gave her the same false answer. And the famous $3,500. Reported everywhere. Her estate did still hold jewels her lawyers later auctioned. So no, not literally penniless. Something stranger, liquid broke. A billion-dollar life run down to hotel credit and sold necklaces. The number matters less than the direction. 50 million one way for 50 years. The last years were a hotel room in Beverly Hills. Bedridden, attended by paid staff. The 7th marriage dissolved. The son gone. The woman who had owned palaces on 3 continents died in a rented room. She was buried quietly in the Woolworth family mausoleum in the Bronx. Back with the fortune's founder, the grandfather who had built the tallest building on earth out of nickels. 2 generations before those nickels finished burning through his granddaughter's hands. It's tempting to think her story died with the gossip columns. It didn't. Every study of inherited wealth finds the same quiet pattern. Money handed down without purpose, without work, and without warmth doesn't just fail to protect heirs. It actively finds their wounds. Lottery winners, trust fund heirs, sudden wealth athletes. The fortune always takes the shape of the hole it's poured into. The Vanderbilts spent for status. The Goulds gambled for empire. Barbara Hutton spent for love. And of all the ways we've watched a fortune die on this channel, hers was the only one that never had a chance. Money is a magnifier. Hand it to a builder, it builds. Hand it to a wound, it bleeds. Every fortune ends the same way. The only question is how long it takes. Subscribe. The next story is already turning to dust.